Hello, Planet Earth, and thanks for listening to Master English with Tim, the podcast where I help you learn English in depth and detail and without ever hurrying. This week's episode is for B1, B2, and C1 students of English and continues our discussion of the present perfect verb tense. This episode will be useful for people who think the present perfect is difficult or confusing, and it will also be good for people who want to review the present perfect. There is a lot of information on the present perfect out there in the internet and in textbooks. So is there anything special about this episode? Anything that is different from the explanations you can find in other places? Well, yes. So usually when people learn the present perfect, they do it the extensive way, with lots of different situations and lots of different present perfect sentences to describe them. That's a good way to learn, but I am going to try something different. I am going to use just one present perfect sentence and look at it from many different perspectives and in many different versions with only small differences between them. This will help you get a very solid and detailed understanding of this one sentence without your brain doing the work of changing to new situations and new times and new people. This method is called the intensive way. My hope is that this one sentence and the different versions of it will give you a very, very strong, deeply understood model that will help you to understand other present perfect sentences with a similar level of detail. Okay, first let's review the construction of the present perfect, and remember that a longer description of the construction is contained at the beginning of episode 118. Please remember that we construct the present perfect using a subject, then have or has, and then a past participle, also called the third form of a verb. Remember also that we have regular and irregular past participles. Regular past participles seem easy to remember because you just add d or ed, d or ed, to the end of them, but in reality, lots of people have problems pronouncing the sounds at the end of them, especially when they end in two or more consonants. I talked about this problem of many consonants one after another in episode 116. Also, irregular past participles are hard to remember and also sometimes hard to pronounce for the same reason. They often also have several consonants at the end of them. You can learn a lot of the most used, most important irregular past participles in episode 115. Okay, we can use the present perfect to talk about an action that started in the past and continues until now. There are two parts in this explanation, the part about starting in the past and the part about continuing until now. We only have one now, so that part is easy. The part about starting in the past is more complicated because we don't always say when an action started. Sometimes context is enough to say when the action happened. Okay, so let's imagine a situation where we can use the present perfect. A man and a woman have a 10-year-old son who has behavior that is pretty unpredictable. In one quarter, by the way, a quarter at school is about 2.5 months. So in one quarter at school, his behavior is good. And in another quarter, his behavior is not so good. Right now, it is the end of the second quarter at their son's school, and the man and woman are at the school to talk with his teachers about how their son's behavior in school has been in just the last few months. The parents already know about the boy's grades, and the teacher tells them this: "Your son has behaved pretty well in class." So the action is behave, and even though the teacher doesn't say anything directly about when this action happened, this meeting is something that happens once every quarter. So it's clear that the start of this good behavior is the beginning of the quarter and the end is around now. We have no information from the speaker of this sentence, from the teacher, about whether he thinks the good behavior will continue or not. Okay, now I want to make sure that you understand our example sentence really in detail because we're going to keep working with different versions of it. So, listen to the sentence one more time. Your son has behaved pretty well in class. Now, let me ask you 3 questions about this sentence. First, when did the good behavior start? The answer is that the good behavior started at least a couple of months ago at the beginning of the current quarter. But it's possible that it started even earlier. The fact is that the sentence doesn't give much information about when the good behavior started, but we do have information from the context I told you about the fact that the parents and the teacher are in a quarterly meeting. So, question 2. Does the boy's good behavior continue until now? So the answer here is a clear yes. That's because this is a present perfect sentence, and so we can be sure that the behavior continues until now. That's what the present perfect is about something that started in the past and continues until now. Third and last question. What does the teacher think about the boy continuing to behave well? So you have 3 choices here. First, the teacher might expect that the boy will continue to behave well. Second, the teacher might want to say that the good behavior is finished. And third, the teacher might be giving no information about whether the boy will continue to behave well or not. Okay, so the third answer is correct. There is no information about the boy behaving well in the future, and also no information about him not behaving well in the future. Why? That is because the present perfect gives information about actions or situations that start in the past and continue until now. Will the action or situation continue until after now, into the future? Well, maybe or maybe not. The present perfect does not talk about the future. Okay, let's come back to our original present perfect sentence. Here it is again. Your son has behaved pretty well in class. I think you will agree that this sentence is pretty basic. It doesn't include any information saying when the action started or how often it happened. The context alone, the fact that the teacher says the sentence in a quarterly meeting, does give information, but it is possible to be more direct about when the action happened, but the teacher just does not do that. So let's add some information to the sentence. Listen now to 5 different versions of the present perfect sentence. Listen carefully because I'm going to ask you the same 3 questions about these sentences afterwards. 1. Your son has behaved pretty well in class recently. 2. Your son has behaved pretty well in class this year. 3. Your son has behaved pretty well in class this quarter. 4. Your son has behaved pretty well in class since the quarter started. 5th and last. Your son has behaved pretty well in class since April. So, some questions, 3 of them. 1. When did the good behavior start? So the answer is that in each sentence, the behavior started at different moments. In one, the good behavior started recently. In another, it was this year. In another, it was this quarter. In another, it was when the quarter started. And in another, it was in April. Question 2. Does the boy's good behavior continue until now? The answer is again clearly yes. That's because these are still present perfect sentences, all 5 of them, and so we can be sure that the behavior continues until now. Third and last. What does the teacher think about the boy continuing to behave well? So you have 3 choices here. First, the teacher expects that the boy will continue to behave well. Second, the teacher might want to say that the good behavior is finished. And third, the teacher might be giving no information about whether the boy will continue to behave well or not. So it's the third answer. That's because the present perfect gives information about actions or situations that start in the past and continue until now. So will the action or situation, will the good behavior continue until after now, into the future? Well, maybe or maybe not. The present perfect, again, does not talk about the future. Okay, let's look at another way we can add detail to present perfect sentences. We can add detail by saying how long the action or situation continued, which is pretty similar to saying when it started. To say how long an action or situation has continued, we can use the common preposition for. 4 examples. Again, listen closely so you can answer the questions at the end. 1. Your son has behaved pretty well in class for 2 months. 2. Your son has behaved pretty well in class for the last 2 months. 3. Your son has behaved pretty well in class for the last 10 weeks. 4th and last. Your son has behaved pretty well in class for the last several weeks. So there is little that is new in these 4 sentences. The only thing that we have added is the for to say how long the situation has gone on. So again, back to our 3 usual questions. 1. When did the good behavior start? The answer is that each of the sentences gives some information about the moment when the good behavior started. The answer was always something like 2 months ago, although in other situations it could be a different length of time, but here it is 2 months. 2. Does the boy's good behavior continue until now? The answer is once more yes, no question about it. These are all still present perfect sentences, so we know that the behavior continues until the present. Third and last. What does the teacher think about the boy continuing to behave well? So you have 3 choices here. You already know them. First, the teacher might expect that the boy will continue to behave well. Second, the teacher might want to say that the good behavior has already finished. And third, the teacher might be giving no information about whether the boy will continue to behave well or not. And of course, it's the third answer that is correct. That's because the present perfect gives information about actions or situations that start in the past and continue until now. Will the action or situation continue until the future? Well, maybe, but maybe not. Again, the present perfect does not talk about the future. It's about things that started in the past and continue until now. Okay, alright, we have one more way we can add information about time to present perfect sentences. We can add information about how often something happened. So, listen now to more versions of our original present perfect sentence that add information about how often this boy's good behavior happened. Just remember the original context, which is that the teacher is meeting with the parents and talking about the boy's behavior during the current quarter, the one that is now going to end soon. 7 examples. 1. Your son has behaved pretty well in class just once. 2. Your son has behaved pretty well in class a few times. 3. Your son has behaved pretty well in class many times. 4. Your son has generally behaved pretty well in class. 5. Your son has behaved pretty well in class most of the time. 6. Your son has consistently behaved pretty well in class. 7th and last. Your son has generally behaved pretty well in class every day. Okay, now that you have heard many versions of this one sentence, you hopefully understand the idea behind the present perfect pretty well. Listen please to the original sentence one more time though. Your son has behaved pretty well in class. Now let's modify that sentence so that it is not in the present perfect, but instead in the present simple. So, the new present simple sentence is, your son behaves pretty well in class. So, is there a difference in meaning between this present simple sentence and the present perfect one? Yes, there is a real difference. In the present simple sentence, the teacher says that the boy behaves well now. That idea that the boy behaves well now is probably based on the fact that he behaved well recently. And now here is the difference. In the present simple sentence, the teacher expresses some idea that he expects the boy will continue to behave well in the future. That is not true of the present perfect one. Okay, now let's put our original sentence in the past simple. Here it is. Your son behaved pretty well in class. Here, the teacher says that the son behaved well in the past. This could be during one specific class, for example, yesterday at 1 p.m., or it could be 2 or 5 or many times. He also could use this past simple sentence in a different situation. He could use it to tell a story where he tells about one event and then the next event and the next one, and so on. Alright, now you have heard over 15 different versions of our original sentence. Now I want you to listen to just one more sentence and tell me what you think of it. So here it is. Your son has behaved well last month too. So, does this sentence sound correct or incorrect to you? Or are you not sure? Well, the sentence is incorrect. It is not correct because it combines the present perfect with last month, which is a time period that is clearly in the past. The teacher could say, your son has behaved well this month, but it's not correct to say your son has behaved well last month. It's also not ever, it is never correct to use the present perfect with time expressions like ago or yesterday, last week, last month, last year, the day before yesterday, 3 years ago, during the pandemic, when we were kids, and so on. Okay, that's all for our discussion of the present perfect. I hope that this episode helped you to understand and use the present perfect better. I will see you all next week. Thank you so much for listening.